One of the deadliest assassins in the DC universe lost his right eye. And it wasn't Batman who took it. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a supervillain. It was his wife. She looked him in the face, raised a gun, and pulled the trigger. And here's the part that should stop you cold. By his own code, the code he's killed hundreds of men for, Slade Wilson would tell you she had every right to do it. This is the story of how a 16-year-old boy who just wanted to serve his country became Deathstroke the Terminator, the most feared mercenary alive, and how every single person who ever loved him paid for it. Stay with me, because this isn't a villain origin, it's a slow-motion tragedy, and it starts with a lie. Slade Wilson was 16 when he lied about his age and enlisted in the United States Army. Not to escape anything, not for money. He wanted to serve, and he turned out to be terrifyingly good at it. He fought through the wars of the Cold War era and rose fast, and at a base called Camp Washington, he met the person who would shape his entire life. Captain Adeline Kane, an elite instructor sent to train soldiers in new methods of warfare. Adeline had trained hundreds of men. She had never seen anything like Slade. He absorbed every fighting form she threw at him in under a year, so she trained him privately, pushed him harder, and somewhere in those sessions, the soldier and the teacher fell in love. They married. She was carrying their first son, Grant, when Slade shipped out again. And on the other side of the world, in the middle of a war, he was saved by an SAS commando named William Wintergreen. Remember that name. Wintergreen becomes the closest thing Slade Wilson ever has to a conscience. So far, this is a hero's story, a gifted soldier, a brilliant wife, a son on the way, a loyal friend. Now watch how one decision at a time, it all goes dark. The Army came to Slade with an offer, a medical experiment officially designed to help soldiers resist enemy truth serums. He volunteered. That wasn't the whole truth. It was a super soldier procedure, and it nearly killed him. Slade collapsed into a coma, and when he woke up, he wasn't entirely human anymore. The comics claim he could now access 90% of his brain. And let's be honest, that's comic book science, not real neuroscience. But the result was undeniable. Enhanced strength, speed, reflexes, senses, and in time, one of the strongest healing factors of any enhanced human in DC. A mind that processes combat like a supercomputer, and a body that recovers from almost anything. And what did the Army do with their new superhuman? They shelved him, refused to redeploy him, the perfect soldier benched by the people he'd given his body to. Then came the moment that defines everything after. A vindictive officer sent Wintergreen, Slade's friend, the man who'd saved his life, on a suicide mission. And Slade made his choice. He went in alone, against orders, and pulled Wintergreen out. The Army threw him out for it. Sit with that. The first law of Slade Wilson's life, loyalty over orders, personal code over every rule. It sounds noble. It saved a man. Keep watching what that same law does next. Publicly, Slade Wilson became a rich, world-famous safari hunter. A second son arrived, Joseph, a wife, 2 sons, a best friend who stood as godfather. Privately, Slade had found the only work worthy of what he'd become. He built a second self, Deathstroke the Terminator, the world's best, most expensive mercenary, and with it he built the thing he'd point to for the rest of his life whenever anyone called him a monster. The code. He honors every contract, he finishes every job, he never, ever betrays a client. And understand why the code matters so much to him. To Slade, a mercenary without a code isn't a professional, he's just a murderer. Every terrible thing he does only stays bearable as long as he believes the code makes him different. Hold on to that. It explains everything you're about to see. His wife didn't know. His children didn't know. And the code was about to be tested in the cruelest way a father can imagine. A criminal called the Jackal wanted the name of one of Deathstroke's clients, so he took the one thing Slade couldn't replace. He kidnapped Joseph, a little boy held at knife point and a simple trade. The client's name or your son's life, and Slade said no. Not because he didn't love his son, because he was arrogant enough to believe he could have both. Keep the code intact and save Joey. He was the fastest man in the room. He'd always been the fastest man in the room. He went in, blades out, certain. He was fast. He was not fast enough. A killer's knife crossed Joseph's throat before Slade could reach him. The boy survived, but his vocal cords didn't. Joseph Wilson never spoke again. And when Adeline learned the truth, that her husband was Deathstroke, that his secret life had put a knife to their child's throat, and that his precious code had been weighed against her son and won, she took him out to face her, looked him in the eye, and shot him in the head. His enhanced reflexes moved just enough. He lived. He lost the eye. And in the classic telling of the story, that is where the one-eyed mask truly comes from. Not from a battle, but from a marriage. From the first person who understood exactly what he was. You'd think a man loses an eye to his own wife and learns something. Watch what the code does instead. His firstborn, Grant, the boy who grew up worshiping a father who was never home, followed him into the mercenary life. Grant took a contract from a criminal organization called HIVE, Kill or Capture the Teen Titans. To pull it off, he accepted their experimental enhancements, an unstable version of what ran in his father's veins. The enhancements burned through his body mid-mission, and Grant Wilson died fighting children his own age. And Slade, grieving, guilty, and hiding both behind professionalism, did the most Deathstroke thing imaginable. He picked up his dead son's contract. He declared war on a team of teenagers and called it honoring Grant. That decision consumed the next decade of his life. He planted a troubled teenage girl named Tara inside the Titans as his spy, a manipulation so ugly that modern readers often read it as grooming, though the comics left it ambiguous. And it blew up in his face when his own mute son, Joseph, now the hero Jericho, with the power to possess bodies through eye contact, infiltrated Slade's operation and helped take him down, his son working against him. The family scoreboard kept getting worse. It never stopped. Years later, Joseph was corrupted, his mind overtaken by tainted souls, and turned into something monstrous. The only person capable of stopping him was his father. Slade Wilson drove a sword through his own son's heart. Count it with me. Joseph, throat cut over the code, later killed by his father's own hand. Grant, dead chasing his father's legend. Adeline, years later even she would be driven into madness by a transfusion of Slade's own blood given to save her life, and finally granted a mercy killing he couldn't perform. Wintergreen, the friend he broke every rule to save, later murdered by Slade's own possessed hands, and his daughter Rose, injected by her own father with the same serum that made him, spiraling, in the classic continuity, into a psychosis in which she cut out her own eye to match his. Batman never did that to him, the Titans never did that to him, the Justice League never did that to him. He did. So here's the truth about Deathstroke the Terminator, and it's the reason he might be the most tragic character DC has ever written. He was never destroyed by his enemies. He was destroyed by the one thing he refuses to question. A code that sounds like honor and works like a disease. Loyalty over orders saved Wintergreen. The same law, 20 years later, chose a client's name over his son's voice. It's the same man. It's the same code. That's the horror of it, and he can never let it go, because without the code, Slade Wilson would have to admit that all of it, the throat, the grave, the madness, the eye his own daughter carved out, happened for nothing. Maybe that's why Adeline understood Deathstroke better than anyone. She looked at the man behind the mask and judged him by his own code. So I'll leave the verdict to you. Is Deathstroke's code a warped kind of honor, or just the story a killer tells himself so he can sleep? Pick a side and defend it in the comments. The best argument gets pinned. And if you want the next chapter, the day this one-eyed man took on the entire Justice League alone and almost won, subscribe. That story's coming.